I'm a Cosmos tech bull, and just Cosmos bull. And
always have been.
even though the price goes down, the tech goes up.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rollup. Welcome to a chain abstraction palooza where we just wrapped up an epic one-day marathon in the heart of New York City, diving deep into chain abstraction with some of the top teams in crypto. Trust me, this series is packed with insights, laughs, and a few surprises you won't want to miss. Shout out to Omni Network for helping to put this together with their upcoming mainnet soon, targeting the interoperability and UX problem that we're currently facing in the Ethereum and modular ecosystem. We really enjoyed this series and looking forward to putting all of this content out there. Let's jump right into today's episode after a quick word from some of our awesome partners who make this possible.
Vertex Edge is now live on Say Network. Say users can now trade 50 plus spot and perp markets with the unified order book liquidity of Vertex Edge across Arbitrum, Blast, Mantle, and Say. The next 6 weeks, 850,000 Say tokens will be up for grabs as trading rewards every single week, exclusively on Say. Join Vertex on Say Network now on Vertex Edge. That's vertexprotocol.com.
Cartesia is your home for app-specific rollups. At the forefront of developing new tools and platforms that enhance the capabilities of blockchain technology, Cartesia enables applications that are flexible and built to scale. Build on a full Linux environment and use traditional software libraries, but in blockchain development. Go to cartesia.io, that's cartesia.io, to learn more about building your own app chain today.
New York City podcast, last one.
New York City, final one. I think we should kick it off with the obvious question in the room. How dare you work in crypto and look as good as you do? I feel like everybody usually kind of looks like I don't know, like I don't want to say a loser, but
I just dress like normally. This guy's just like got like a designer shirt on or something. Like,
No,
do you think that they put those paint drops on there on purpose, or
I fell
they
into
just
some
spray it?
fell into some construction. And
yeah.
On
he
the
just
way
lives
here,
in Brooklyn,
right?
dude. Yeah.
Way here.
Yeah.
All right.
You're a.
Oh no, sorry, you were.
Sorry, Mr. Podcast host here. You're in New York, so you live here in the New York area.
Yeah. Am I supposed to look at the camera or?
Nah, just here.
Okay.
Nope, you can look at us.
Okay.
If you want to make a big point, you can like stare at it and make eye contact.
Yeah.
with it,
Okay. I live in Williamsburg.
Nice.
I think it's not unique amongst crypto folks. There's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
What does this ETH Bushwick mean?
I like it. It's a vibe. I don't actually go out to Bushwick that often, minus like a few raves here and there. But yeah, it's decentralized, so it'll organize itself apparently.
Is that how those things work?
I mean, that's what they put on the Twitter account, so I'm assuming it's just going to happen someday. Loose consensus, social consensus, and then just going to show up.
Social layer. It's consolidating.
It's a crypto
in
social
Bushwick.
layer of New York.
Yeah.
They have all the steak out in Brooklyn.
I saw a map that was like Manhattan is Baglands, and then just across the street or the bridge is like, in I guess like Williamsburg-ish area is like Etherland.
Yeah.
And then like in the south of Williamsburg is like Solana land. Is that accurate?
I think that could be accurate. I think I have a feeling, or like, I think Ansem lives in Solana lands.
Okay.
So he's somewhere in there. So
Checks
he's
out.
like the density of soul in that area is like fairly high.
Yeah.
Although funny enough, I think some of the Solana folks do also live in Williamsburg as well. Yeah, but I think Ansem kind of.
So on a weekly basis, how often do you like hang out with crypto people?
I don't. Yeah, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I like talking about like tech stuff with people, but I normally don't like socialize that much. Yeah.
Socialize that much, or with crypto people?
Just in general, I like to.
You have a girlfriend?
Yeah, I have a girlfriend, so
Nice.
like primarily most of my social life revolves around her.
So what's your like role at Polymer? Like, what's your day to day?
I think at one point I used to write code consistently, and I used to spend a lot of time doing like research, like product, like engineering work. These days it's more like marketing, like branding, BD, it's very different now than it was before. Different problem set. Yeah.
When did you guys start Polymer originally?
We started working on the interoperability problem in 2021. I think we started in earnest like early 2022. That's kind of when like funding came in. We managed to hire some people. So I would say like early 2022 is like when we had a team. In 2021, I think it was just like exploratory, trying to raise funds for an idea.
And were you always in love with IBC? Is that a fair way to put it?
No, actually, I think the obsession or love or infatuation kind of grew over time. I think initially we were taking a similar path to Axelar. So our first idea was, Thorchain was really popular at the time. I don't recommend forking it. The code base was god awful. I don't know if it's better now. So we looked at Thorchain, and our idea was, okay, if we can take Thorchain, they have threshold signatures, and we just replace the DEX with an interop protocol, and we can do like cross-chain interop generically, and get to market fairly quickly with that product. At some point, we realized we were going down the same path as Axelar. That's kind of Axelar's product, essentially. Like they have threshold signatures, they have their own like GMP interop protocol. And at the same time, we're also designing our own. We're like, okay, if I'm designing an interop protocol, what do I need? And we felt like as we were designing it, we were repeating a lot of the same things that like IBC had already solved for. And if you look at the specs, there's a lot of like corner cases, edge cases around like upgrades. Like, what if you like do a application upgrade and there's like 4 different chains? How do you do it safely? Like, there's all these edge cases that they like put a lot of thought into. And we're like, do we want to put a lot of thought into the same things and come up with something similar, or do we want to just use this thing that already exists? And I think that's kind of like where like we came around to IBC, and then since then I've been just shilling it on Twitter for like the last few years.
And tell me about kind of, so I know the current strategy is like Interop Hub, right?
Yeah.
But previously, you guys, I know you're putting time into like ZK IBC. I'm curious to hear. I feel like we went through a trough with ZK, where a lot of time across the industry was spent on ZK, and a lot of people came out thinking basically like proof generation times are too long and it's too expensive right now. Tell me about like how your team like was thinking about that as you guys shifted away from, because you're no longer using ZK in any component, right?
Well, we are open to working with like ZK VM teams. There's a number of ZK VM teams working on proving the OP stack. So I think that work will naturally carry over time, although like you're right, like ZK is not our focus. We went away from ZK for different reasons besides proof generation. We had a proof of concept for, we called it ZK Mint, and the proof generation times weren't that bad. We just modified how like headers are encoded. We modified like a few internal implementation details to get it to work a little bit faster. We moved away from the ZK part because we wanted to focus on the rollup to rollup market. And in the rollup to rollup market, we realized the best architecture from our perspective was to create another rollup. And creating a rollup, and especially building an OP stack, we just didn't need to verify like these like ZK consensus proofs anymore. And now we just settled to Ethereum instead. So that's what replaced it essentially.
Okay. Yeah. And is the main customer here like dApp developers, or like who is the main person that you're targeting for this like connectivity problem?
Yeah, so dApp developers for sure. We also want to target solvers, and chain abstraction is very popular. We're working with a few chain abstraction protocols.
In which way? Like how would you work with those chain abstraction protocols?
We would help on the settlement side.
Okay. So like different wallet abstractions and things like that?
Yeah. So like, I guess the way I would describe settlement in layman's terms is something happened on this chain, prove it to me, kind of, yeah. It's like you said you filled some user's order or some like user's intent, prove that fill, essentially. And there's many ways to do it. Interoperability or general message passing is like one of those ways.
Yeah. So you think like chain abstraction is a collaborative effort for you guys, where you guys are focusing on the settlement stuff, but there's other teams building on the UX side that you can collaborate with to allow their UX to have the functionality that the UX provides, basically.
Yes. Yeah, essentially. Like, we don't want to like reinvent the whole stack. We just want to solve the thing that we enjoy solving very well, and just focus on that alone.
And what is Polymer's vision for chain abstraction within the Ethereum space or within the broader space?
Welcome to the Ignition, Mantle's newest campaign to liberate the growth power of Bitcoin. FBTC Ignition has officially begun with a total token supply of over 2,000 FBTC with a TVL of over 150 million. Right now, you can go on the FBTC website to see all of the featured campaigns, staking opportunities, and liquidity pools where you can utilize FBTC on-chain today for some of the best yields available on L2s. The Ignition Sparkle campaign can be found at fbtc.com/ongoing-campaign.
So like, I think the market right now is very focused on solvers and intents.
Yeah.
I think the reason why we have solvers and intents mostly is because there's just long latencies going across layer 2s.
Yeah.
And
like what times there? Like
so
what times are these latencies that you're seeing that are long?
to do it safely, it's like 12 to 16 minutes.
Okay.
You have, like, if you want to bypass Ethereum Finality, you're going to incur some reorg risk. Some messaging protocols will allow applications to take on that reorg risk. There's a few, like I think Layer 0 and Hyperlane do like 30 seconds, 40 to 50 seconds. I think Wormhole and Axelar do like anywhere between like 27 minutes to 40 minutes. So you have one class of these applications that wait for Ethereum Finality, and that's safe to route liquidity, of course, because it's finalized. And some that like there is some risk involved. And I think a lot of the solvers that like do these fills, they are taking on some of that risk. So they're like, I will charge you some amount of money, and I'll take on this risk for you, and you get the UX that you want. But if we end up in a world where there's a lot of, like, maybe hypothetically there's like super builders just go off, and there's like a bunch of different super builder things. So like Polygon Ag Layer treats like the Ag Layer as a giant VM. Like this is single state machine, and there's like, these are just portions of state. I'm gonna generate a whole ZK proof for the whole thing, and then everything's like composable. In that world, you don't necessarily need like the solvers, because like the latency between those pieces of state, like if when the super chain launches their in our protocol, they're also aiming for that to be like composable, like intra-block. And like NodeKit's goal is to also make things composable intra-block. So if you have intra-block composability, you can just have on-chain liquidity and just have people like use that liquidity versus like having someone like fill it ahead of time. Then you have to wait like 12 to 16 minutes for it to settle. So like I think within these like tiny ecosystems, there's going to be less of a need for the solvers. And maybe across them, there still will be a need for those solvers. How
do you think about Polymer's rollup in comparison to the value prop of like the interop across something like the superchain?
I think Polymer's value prop is whenever you treat something like a giant state machine, there's some like upper bound in how big that state machine can become. Because you could imagine that like you don't necessarily want to include everyone. Optimism has this concept of a dependency set. So they're like, in this dependency set, everyone can interoperate. And if you're outside the dependency set, that's a whole different rollup cluster. So now you're starting to see these rollup clusters form, and each cluster is going to have like a size limit where it's like efficient for the folks in that cluster to like establish like economies or like establish trade with one another. And I see Polymer's role primarily in like cross-cluster communication. Polymer can help in intra-cluster communication, but there's much more value in cross-cluster because these clusters won't naturally talk to one another.
Interesting. So basically what I'm understanding or hearing is that you don't really imagine a huge role for solvers within each of these individual clusters, but kind of without that and operating across all of them together, that is where you imagine solvers playing the biggest part.
Yeah, wherever there's increased latency. So if there's increased settlement latencies, then I think solvers make sense. If there's like no settlement latency, then probably solvers don't make sense, because then like you're paying for UX you would get otherwise with just on-chain liquidity. So it just depends on settlement latencies.
Got it. Interesting.
So you guys have been in development since you got funded, like two or so years. Just did testnet, I think in March, or some sort of like version of testnet.
Yeah.
How's the development going? And are you guys still on testnet, or is there a next iteration? Like what's coming ahead here?
Yeah. So the testnet's still live. The testnet will continue to keep it live for people that want to do some development across across the Sepolia networks or the Sepolia L2s. We are planning on launching mainnet soon, in like the next few months or so. But yeah, that's the next step, just mainnet launch. Yeah.
Do you imagine that end users are going to be putting, is it more of a B2B protocol or is
Yes.
it, okay, so like I'm never going to put my funds directly on Polymer's Rollup.
Yes, unless the user wants to, and this is like, you would have to get probably some bridge to build this functionality. Like over IBC, you can naturally do these transfers, and no one's going to charge you for them. They're like kind of like these like free bridges that just come like with IBC. So if you have like a wallet that integrates us, technically a user could like use the wallet and be like, hey, I want to transfer some funds over this channel. But whether or not that like because essentially like over IBC, like these ICS20 or IBC transfers still result in technically a wrapped asset. The way it's locked is a little different, but it's still a wrapped asset. Whether that wrapped asset has value or not is like up to the application protocols on that chain. So if there's some DeFi protocol that has utility for it, sure it has value. But yeah, anyone can create like bridge tokens anywhere they want over this protocol for essentially for free minus like gas costs.
Got it. Okay. Is the initial go-to-market going to be centered around, you said, you actually said it in a very precise way, which fell out of my brain at this point, but effectively using Interop allows you to just look at the state of other chains, and that can be used to like settle balances for solvers. So does that mean your initial go-to-market is effectively going to be focusing on offering Polymer's Interop as a tool to facilitate settlement for requests or like intents that they fulfilled?
Yeah, that's the idea, since that's just where the market is today. Yeah. I mean, the hope is that the market will evolve beyond that, since I actually think that just for settlement alone, Interop is not as interesting of a product. And the reason why I think this is because there's a lot of features in IBC that only like advanced applications will really be able to leverage. There's like, timeouts, authentication, like application versioning, like upgrades, like there's a long list of things that, like if you were building a very complex app, those things can become a lot more interesting besides just like, proving state from one chain to the next. If you're just proving state, like a zero knowledge proof of like the state of that chain or some other mechanisms can also work as well, or like an oracle. Yeah.
Okay, that's short term. How are you thinking about it like long term then?
In the long term, I envision that there's going to be a lot of these like application specific rollups. So I'm sure you guys saw like the story announcement earlier today. They announced like their like purpose-built like L1 blockchain, and in like a macro sense, like if you look at like DYDX and you look at story, you see this acceleration of the time between when an application the first launches as a smart contract to like prove like the concept, to like them finding some sort of PMF and being like, okay, like how can we scale this thing? And you saw some of like I think Jason did a good job of like writing all the issues that they encountered as they went through this journey over 2.5 years, where they finally ended up saying that, hey, look, we need to build something that's purpose built for our workload. So we need to make something that's optimized for these giant like dependency graphs of these different like IP assets. And I think as like applications start to like go in that direction, and as this time starts to shorten, we anticipate that there's going to be more and more like app-specific rollups than generalized L2s. I know Andy has talked about.
Always yelling this.
Yeah, always yelling this. So
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, like we're really bullish on this future. We're working on this framework called Polymer. It's similar to Rollkit. It enables ABCI compatible like frameworks to be deployed on top. So like Cosmos SDK rollups on Ethereum would be possible. And I'm a Cosmos tech bull, and just Cosmos bull.
Always have been.
Yeah, always have been. And even though the price goes down, the tech goes up. So like I think from like a practical engineering perspective, the Cosmos SDK is ahead of the curve with respect to other app-specific rollup frameworks. And I think Story is a testament to that, and like many other protocols have chosen to build with that framework as well.
Yeah, no, I relate to that on a personal level as well. Like a lot of our work, we definitely explored a number of like stacks that were out there, and there have been a ton of issues in the Cosmos ecosystem, but like a ton of good builders and like unbiased technology. I mean, IBC is like a great example of that.
Yeah.
You got anything for us?
Any
kind of final alpha?
Any alpha for the community?
I have some alpha. I have one alpha. Besides like the mainnet sing thing, we're working on this really interesting Subfinality interop protocol So we talked a bit about how there's reorg risk beneath Ethereum Finality. So far, no one has properly solved the problem of if Ethereum has not finalized, how can I properly communicate across, maybe like even across clusters of rollups? So there's like teams working on solving that for a single cluster, but no team trying to solve that across these clusters. So we saw this gap in the market, and basically the UX we want to end up is like, how can we communicate with block time latency across these rollups with some safety guarantees? And the intuition that we're kind of leaning on here is that the only information that the rollup knows at like 2 seconds, when you generate, like when the rollup just generates a block, is the rollup knows about the layer 1. The layer 1 does not know about the rollup. So using this layer 1 information, we developed this protocol to essentially create this dependency graph of transactions beneath Ethereum Finality. And at the end of this process, so like after 12 to 16 minutes, we look at the entire graph, and based on which view of the layer 1 actually gets finalized, we commit or revert the entire graph. So this is a novel protocol that we're working on and planning on launching later this year. Yeah.
Interesting. So does that mean that like, what are the like functional outputs of that for end users? I get using that kind of like graph-like structure, and what does that give you an advantage in?
Welcome aboard on our journey into the singularity. This is the endgame roadmap for Frax and Fraxtal, the new L2 out of the Frax ecosystem that is totally based on fractal scaling. Fraxtal is a modular L2 blockchain built by Frax with modular and fractal scaling in mind. Fractal scaling is based on the Mandelbrot set of fractal images, and it explains how L2s become L3s and the entire app chain lifecycle goes through its evolution. The Frax ecosystem is made of some of the top builders in the space and has stemmed from its OG days of the Frax stablecoin. It is now in the LST space, the LRT space, and this Fraxtal L2 joins the existing suite of Frax products, including Frax Swap and Frax Lend. You can see Frax Ferry, the bridge to go from any chain, Arbitrum, Optimism, or mainnet into the Fraxtal mainnet. Bridge your tokens and bring your Frax assets into the Fraxtal ecosystem. Join today to get the best out of Fraxtal. You are still early. Join today. Take part in our expedition into the singularity.
Everclear is pioneering the clearing layer. The clearing layer can almost be thought of as splitwise when you go on a trip with friends, but for the blockchain. What I mean by that is when users are sending cross-chain messages, there's oftentimes fillers and solvers who have balances left on different chains that they need to rebalance and reset their positions. This is where Everclear comes in. Everclear is pioneering a collaborative approach to the chain abstraction future, and they are willing to work with interoperability partners, solvers, and other providers in the space to build a interoperable and chain abstraction future. Check out Everclear at everclear.org, and welcome back to the Rollup.
The graph structure is an internal implementation detail. In terms of like the UX for the user, they will get like sub 10 second cross-chain transactions with some reorg protection. Yeah, so like it removes, so like if, I guess like to use in the context of like intent-based liquidity bridge or settlement for these solvers, like normally solvers like, yeah, sure, I can settle this transaction and get my liquidity back in like 30 seconds. But without reorg protection, the solver has to price in the reorg risk. Yeah, so the solver has to say like, okay, I want my liquidity back in 30 seconds, but I'm taking on significant risk, so I'm just going to charge them like more basis points. Yeah. But with this protocol, you can say like, okay, well, I can settle in 30 seconds, but I'm protected against a reorg, so I can like charge user less in terms of basis points for this fill.
Does that mean that like the end transaction would end up being reverted for the end user, or effectively it's kind of like a generalized insurance mechanism for solvers in the event that there is a reorg?
It's not insurance, there's no payout, it's that the transactions will be reverted.
Okay, so it will be reverted. Yeah. Cool. All right.
Makes sense. Super cool.
Well, thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah, cheers, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.